In this video, we'll be talking about another one of the design schedules, which is equipment airflow. So the families in the MPP have been set up to use connected airflows with the ability to override that information. So in doing that, what you end up with in the schedule is a calculated value that you can't edit. There needs to be another way to edit these values. So you could obviously override an input, which I have on hidden right now. So an input, as we've discussed in many different chapters in this user manual, is essentially an override. So if you needed to override a given value from connected airflow, you could edit the input and then the scheduled value would update. And when you were done, you could hide that column. So that's one method to do it. However, we wanted a schedule already set up where users could just go to if they need to override values. You could also go to the family itself. I'm going to show both methods. So let's go to this given family. The airflow properties that show up in the schedules are up in constraints, similarly to lots of all the families with all the control parameters up here. If you want to see the actual connected values, scroll down to the mechanical flow area. So under mechanical flow, here we have a calculated inlet duct airflow, so that's our exhaust, and an outlet duct airflow, which right now is at 0. So there may be a disconnect somewhere, maybe someone didn't finish the connection from the riser. Could be lots of options why this is 0. So we of course don't want 0 in our schedule, and that's where the input would come into play. So if this supply airflow input was 0, we'd be using the connected value, which is 0. So I'll change that back to 2750. So you can edit these right in the family. That's perfectly acceptable. And then we'll look at the design schedule. So if we go down to schedules here, under M_design, we have airflow in components and airflow in equipment. I actually have the quality control sheet open, which has these two schedules placed. So here's a lot of the design schedules in the MPP. I'd encourage you guys to get familiar with this sheet. So let's scroll into equipment airflow verification. So here's the design schedule we have. Essentially, we're showing you with gray values what are calculated values, and blue is essentially overrides and inputs. So for any given family, you could come right to this schedule to update the values that show up in the schedule on the construction documents. So in this case, ERV1, we have an input being used on the supply airflow side. However, the return exhaust side, we should be using the calculated value. So I'm going to put this back to 0. And now the schedule on the construction documents will be showing the proper values. This design airflow parameter was really only needed for a couple families. One that, well, I guess the one is basically fans. So fans, we have parameters that could be supply, return, or exhaust airflows. So we couldn't set it up how this is set up. We do have calculated airflows. However, the schedule, the schedule is not using these same design parameters. So we're not using supply airflow in the fan schedule because, like I said, it could be exhaust airflow, it could be return airflow, etc. So that's where this design airflow essentially is an override for the fans. So if your fan design was 150 CFM, you edit that, and then your schedule is using this value. And then we have airflow in components, which just takes things a little bit further. So now you have the outside air broken out here that you could update percentages or design values. You could also, and you also see how these airflows will trickle into the components. So like this fan airflow, like we were just talking about, this is using the calculated value unless a design airflow is specified. So this will trickle down into the fan airflow, which is what ends up being scheduled. So once again, it's just another schedule to summarize the information. Now, I'm sure people are wondering, well, good God, why is there so many airflow parameters? And really, it's plain and simple, because there's firms out there that may want to schedule all of those airflows in a schedule. So you can't do that with one parameter. So we had to come up with a global solution to satisfy everyone. So every component has its own airflow. However, in pretty much all the cases, the component airflows have a formula in it, so you're really not editing it. It's just there displaying information if you need it. So really, the supply and return exhaust airflow streams are how you're driving the airflow through the equipment. Hope that makes sense. Thanks.